Tonight on Reporting Scotland, fugitive Nicholas Rossi has been extradited to the USA. The 36-year-old, who's suspected of faking his own death, is wanted in Utah in connection with rape claims. 2 people are arrested after a man died in a shooting in Edinburgh on Hogmanay. Also in tonight's programme, as the Scottish Government reduces support for Ukrainian refugees in temporary accommodation, we hear from Olha, whose family's been living in hotels for a year and a half. Also in tonight's programme, 75 former workers at an Aberdeen paper mill have won a legal action over claims they were made redundant without being properly consulted.
Horrifying to see that workers can still in this day and age be treated like that. No notice whatsoever.
The overall action involves about 300 former workers. Other claims are ongoing.
Coming up in tonight's sport, it's another medal for Laura Muir as the middle distance runner is awarded a retrospective bronze 9 years after the event.
And a campaign to halt the building of more power stations on Loch Ness over concerns about wild fish. Hello, I'm Sally Magnuson. Welcome to Friday's programme. Back in December 2021, as the Omicron variant of COVID spread, a 36-year-old man was admitted to hospital in Glasgow seeking urgent treatment. He'd checked in as Arthur Knight, but was in fact Nicholas Rossi, a registered sex offender on the run from the US state of Utah, where he's wanted in connection with rape charges. After a long-running legal dispute, Rossi finally left Scotland today. Aileen Clark has more.
Nicholas Rossi's appearance in the Scottish courts became something of a spectacle. During the 2 years, he exhausted every legal avenue in his bid to convince a Scottish sheriff and then judges that he was not in fact Nicholas Rossi, wanted in Utah in connection with rape charges, but a completely different man called Arthur Knight. His attempts to avoid extradition to the United States came to a final halt last month when judges at the appeal court found the evidence that he was indeed Nicholas Rossi overwhelming. Often having plenty to say for himself in court, he was less forthcoming during this interview with BBC Scotland's Stephen Godden.
We heard in court, though, that you were identified by tattoos or scarring on your body.
That's not true.
Is it worth seeing your left forearm? I mean, could you just raise
Honestly,
up?
I'm exhausted. It's nothing personal. I'm just exhausted.
It was while he was a patient at the Queen Elizabeth University Hospital in Glasgow, seriously ill with COVID, in December 2021, that his identity first came to light. A surprise indeed, as he had previously faked his own death. It was a story picked up by the American news networks.
But on Wednesday, authorities confirmed Aberdine was found alive in Scotland.
I can't say this enough how bizarre this next story is, this one coming out of Rhode Island.
Rossi will now be in the care of the Utah legal authorities, and the news of his extradition has been welcomed there. Meanwhile, police in Essex, who arrested Rossi in October in connection with an allegation of rape, are still making inquiries into that case. Aileen Clark, Reporting Scotland.
5 days after he was shot dead, minutes before the bells at Hogmanay, 2 people have been arrested in connection with the death of Mark Webbley. The 38-year-old was gunned down outside the Anchor Inn pub in Edinburgh's Granton area. In the lead-up to the shooting, Mr Webbley had posted a series of videos online daring his enemies to come and get him. Our reporter Richard Forbes has the story.
Do I look scared? Never.
This is Mark Webbley speaking on social media in the run-up to his death.
We were taught for wild men. One shot can end it all.
He was shot on a street in Granton just minutes before the Hogmanay bells and pronounced dead a short time later. Police believe this was a targeted attack.
He's talking good fight, so when you're lying in bed or talking whatever he's doing, saying, we're going to get him, we're going to get him. Well, here stone cold sober. Come and get it.
The videos show him taunting his enemies, and he had a long history of violence. Back in 2005, he was sentenced to 11 years in prison for attempting to murder a gangland rival. Following Mr Webbley's death, his former girlfriend, the Euromillions winner Jane Park, posted a tribute to him on Instagram. Bunches of flowers have also been laid at the crime scene. Forensic teams have spent the week closely examining the surrounding area. Appeals were made for sightings of the red car believed to have been used in the attack, and a vehicle was recovered from the Craigentinney area of the city on Tuesday afternoon. A 32-year-old man and a 25-year-old woman have now been arrested in connection with the incident. The detective leading the investigation said there will continue to be an increased police presence in Granton as the inquiries are ongoing. He also thanked the local community for their patience and support over recent days. Richard Forbes, reporting Scotland.
The Scottish Government is reducing the money it gives local councils to support Ukrainian refugees in temporary accommodation. Last year, local authorities received around £10 million to help people in hotels, but that money won't be provided this year. Opposition councillors say the decision is a disgrace. The government says it will continue to support displaced Ukrainians living in Scotland. Katie Hunter reports.
Olha and her family are Ukrainian refugees who have been living in hotels in Aberdeen for a year and a half. They really appreciate all the support they get and love the city. Speaking through an interpreter, Olha said hotel life can be challenging for her children.
So we are very grateful for the staff of the hotel. They are all very outgoing, very friendly. But again, my daughter has a special nutrition requirement. She needs a certain food, and I cannot cook it here in the hotel. We don't have an access to kitchen, and also she requires a personal space because right now 2 of my children are living in the same room.
Last year, the Scottish Government gave councils around £10 million for extra costs linked to short-term accommodation for Ukrainians. That money won't be provided this year, leaving some councillors concerned.
The stopping of the funding for the Ukrainian refugees is an absolute disgrace, regardless of how the Scottish Government want to spin it. I think councils are being dumped upon once again and left to pick up the pieces of the disastrous financial mismanagement by the Scottish Government.
Some councillors are also worried a shortage of housing means it will be more difficult to move Ukrainian refugees from hotels into permanent accommodation. The Scottish Government says it's invested more than £3 million to support people displaced by Russia's illegal invasion of Ukraine, and the number of people in hotels has been falling.
Local authorities have been working really, really hard to ensure that we decrease the number of Ukrainian refugees in temporary accommodation and get them into permanent long-term accommodation. In fact, there's been a 60% decrease of those in temporary accommodation, Ukrainian refugees in temporary accommodation since November 2022. So it goes to stand that we don't need as much funding for those in temporary accommodation, but we'll continue to support Ukrainian refugees in any way that we possibly can.
Many Ukrainians say that support is still needed because attacks like these are continuing in their country. Katie Hunter, reporting Scotland.
Some of the day's other stories now. The SNP could face another investigation into its finances after taking 5 years to declare loans from its former chief executive, Peter Murrell. The Electoral Commission says the party received 2 loans totalling £15,000 from him in 2018, but didn't notify the Commission until last year. Mr Murrell and his wife, Nicola Sturgeon, were arrested and released without charge last year as part of a police investigation into the SNP's finances. More than £350,000 has so far been paid out to homes and businesses that suffered the worst of Storm Babbitt. Under a government scheme, grants of £1,500 were announced for households damaged by the flooding, with £3,000 for businesses. Councils in the worst-hit areas of Angus and Aberdeenshire received more than 270 claims within a month of the scheme starting. Workers at an Aberdeen paper mill have won their legal action over claims they were made redundant without being properly consulted. Stonywood Paper Mill went into administration in 2022. A mass action was lodged by the Unite Union on behalf of 300 workers. Some have now been awarded compensation, as Louise Hosey reports.
Staff at the historic Stonywood Paper Mill in Aberdeen were devastated when it went into administration in 2022. Many were dismissed with immediate effect.
Anyone who's still to complete a form, please come this side.
A judge has now ruled that around 75 workers were not properly consulted and will receive compensation, understood to be around £4,000 each. But more than 200 former employees like Callum are still waiting to hear when they will receive a payout.
It's been a very slow and frustrating process up to this point. We're confident we'll get there, we know we will, but when you've got people with families who could well do with that money, it is very, very frustrating and upsetting to see things take this long.
Administrators said the pandemic and economic challenges meant the mill had to close. Unite and the legal firm who took on the case said workers were blindsided.
You know, there was a real sense of shock and bewilderment in some ways that people were all of a sudden out of jobs. Over the last few years, it seems it's become more prevalent that employers have gone out of business without announcing it, without any consultation.
It's a stressful process, losing a job at any point. But I think in the case of these workers, it's the way it was done. It's the fact that you have put, in some cases, decades into a company, and then at the very last minute, out of the blue, you're told you don't have a job.
Rulings on the outstanding claims are expected in the coming weeks. Joint Administrators Interpath Advisory told BBC Scotland News it did not wish to comment. Louise Hosey reporting Scotland, Aberdeen.
A drop in footfall recorded in Scottish shops during December rounded off a drab final quarter of 2023 for retailers. That's according to the Scottish Retail Consortium. Gillian Sharp has more.
The hope was for a bit of Christmas sparkle. January may mean quieter times at this Glasgow jewellers, but like many shops, the festive period is crucial.
Christmas weekend was a bit of a letdown. It wasn't quite as busy as we thought it would be, but the few days before that were busier than we expected. And then it's really just fizzled out after lunch on Christmas Eve. So we didn't expect it to be a bumper one.
The time around Christmas is called the Golden Quarter, when shops hope to make enough to see them through traditionally leaner times. But with footfall down, for some shoppers in Glasgow, things have changed.
I do most of my shopping online because it means that you don't need to leave the house, it comes to you, it's a lot easier, you don't need to queue.
We always come up here for the shopping. And it's fine, we like it. It's a nice day out.
People online shopping now is a big thing, so it's a shame it's kind of become a bit tatty.
Edinburgh had a good December according to these figures, with footfall actually going up.
Edinburgh performed better than other parts of Scotland and other retail destinations. That benefited, I guess, from international tourism and return of people to workplaces.
In Glasgow, though, footfall fell. Some point to parts of the city, like bits of Sauchiehall Street. Kieran Keogh has shops in both cities and says he felt a difference.
That Christmas feeling, you can't really put your finger on it, but it certainly felt more special and more Christmassy in Edinburgh than it did here in Glasgow.
Glasgow City Council says its wider figures on the number of people coming into the city centre, not just to shop, but to use pubs, clubs, restaurants and other attractions, were actually up over the festive period. It says it's working with others to deliver success in a changing city centre. Gillian Sharp, reporting Scotland.
A campaign's been launched to halt the building of more power stations on Loch Ness. Plans have been put forward to build a third hydro scheme there. They're seen as a good alternative form of renewable energy when the wind doesn't blow, as our environment correspondent Kevin Keane reports.
It is a place of considerable beauty, and what might or might not live in its depths attracts tourists from all over the world. What's definitely living in Loch Ness are Atlantic salmon. The young fish can spend weeks travelling around the water's edge, trying to make their way out to sea.
Mind if I give you a leaflet?
Yes, that would be lovely.
Highlighting our concerns about the pump storage hydro developments in Loch Ness.
Fishery managers here have launched a campaign against building more hydro schemes until more is known about their impact. They're holding public meetings and delivering 6,000 leaflets into the local community, and describe plans to build 2 more schemes here as an unregulated gold rush.
We feel that guidance is lacking. Developers are spending a lot of time and money. We're having to spend a lot of time and money arguing against the developments in a sensitive environment like Loch Ness. There are lots of other potential sites in Scotland.
The existing Foyers hydro scheme here was opened in the 1970s. It pumps water out of Loch Ness and into a holding reservoir up the mountain. In times of high electricity demand, that water is released to generate the power. Foyers sits about halfway down the east of Loch Ness. The other two, Red John and Loch Kemp, would be built either side. Between them, they could raise and lower the level of the loch by up to 73 centimetres.
On the big open loch, that difference in water height of 2 feet 5 inches would be barely perceptible in many areas. But once you get to the narrower stretches of river here, that could become much more obvious.
Store energy. The industry body tells me these schemes are becoming increasingly important in storing renewable wind energy for use on calm days.
Pumped storage hydro essentially functions as a giant battery which can store energy when there's a lot being produced on the grid, more than we need, and then discharge that at times of high demand.
The developers of the third planned scheme here insist it'll regulate water levels on Loch Ness rather than deplete them. Campaigners disagree and say nature mustn't be sacrificed in favour of tackling climate change. Kevin Keane reporting Scotland, Loch Ness.
The Prime Minister's announcement about an election in the second half of the year has sparked a long campaign. Scotland's political parties are now assessing their chances in what could be a year of significant change. Here's our political correspondent, Andrew Kerr.
1997, a moment of change in the country's history with a new Labour government. 1924, revolutionary change with the Scot Ramsay MacDonald as the first ever Labour Prime Minister. And at some point in 2024, the winner of the Rutherglen by-election last year is hoping for a Labour government this year.
People who have faced the cost of living crisis over the past few years, who are struggling still to make ends meet with mortgage bills going up, with food bills continuing to soar. The Labour Party represents change in those areas, but it also, as it did 100 years ago, represents the power of working people at the heart of government again.
But what about his opponents who say the leader, Sir Keir Starmer, is tacking too far to the right?
What Keir Starmer's outlining is a mission-driven government in the national interest, and a credible government where he's talking about values back at the heart of government again, the idea of service in the interests of people across this country. That's what people want to see.
David Linden wants to be re-elected for the SNP in Glasgow East after a tough 2023, which saw Nicola Sturgeon resign and a renewed focus on the police investigation into the party's finances.
There's no doubt that when people go and see their newsstands and see headlines in the front pages of papers, it is not helpful. But what I want to see going forward are front pages with a headline that shows that by voting for the SNP and voting for Scotland, that there'll be a relentless focus on the cost of living crisis.
Despite these troubled times, he's optimistic.
Polls come and go, and I remember back in 2011 the polls showed that the SNP would lose the election in the January, and in the May it won a historic majority government, something that shouldn't have been possible in a devolved parliament. But look, the SNP has a clear, consistent and concrete message at this election. We want to have that relentless focus on the cost of living crisis.
The Prime Minister may be behind in the polls and is facing internal opposition as he counts down to the election. But the party here is maybe more optimistic.
We do have a positive message that we can send out to voters, and that is that we are offering something different to what Labour and the SNP are. We're also wanting to make sure that the SNP end their obsession with independence, and this is a clear opportunity for Scottish voters to send that message to the SNP that independence is no longer a priority for Scots.
And for the Scottish Liberal Democrats, with 4 MPs, they claim recent by-election success as evidence of a rebound.
We're bringing a message of hope and change, and that includes things like, if you want a party dedicated to fighting the climate emergency, to taking the sewage out of our rivers, to getting real about our healthcare crisis, then it's only the Lib Dems that are offering positive, tangible solutions to all those problems.
The Scottish Greens have no MPs and say it's up to branches to stand Westminster candidates, denying this hyper-localism is a sop to the SNP. They say they are significant players.
It's never been more important, because the moment that Greens are in the room, climate is on the agenda. And I think more people than ever before see that in the wake of the hottest year ever, we really need a UK government that's willing to put climate action front and centre.
1924 saw a Scot going through the palace gates to be appointed by the King. Who might the King be appointing this year as his first Prime Minister elected by the people? Andrew Kerr, reporting Scotland.
Now let's see what Amy's got for us tonight with the sport. And actually a nice story about Laura Muir, isn't it?
I know it's not unusual to see Laura Muir winning medals, Sally, but this most recent medal's a little bit different, we should say. Thanks very much. Good evening. Well, Laura Muir has added to her significant medal collection after retrospectively being awarded a bronze for the European Indoor Championships 9 years after the race. The Scot came fourth in the 3,000 metres in Prague back in 2015, but has been upgraded after Russian athlete Yelena Korobkina was found guilty of doping offences. Muir says she has mixed emotions about the news because the race would have resulted in her first senior international medal if she had been placed third at the time. Let's see how that leaves Muir's medal tally then. She's now up at 14 after going on to win 5 golds at European indoor level, along with 2 golds at European Championships. Muir also clinched a World Championship bronze, a silver and bronze at World Indoors, along with a gold and a bronze at the Commonwealth Games in Birmingham. And of course, the Olympic silver as well, which she won in Tokyo back in 2021. Turning our attention to football then now, and it's bad news for Hibs and their midfielder Josh Campbell, who's been ruled out for at least 3 months with an ankle injury. The 23-year-old collided with teammate Dylan Levitt during last week's Edinburgh derby at Easter Road. He was stretchered off but will not require surgery. Following a short winter break, Scotland's top women's sides are back in action this weekend as the Scottish Cup returns for the 3rd round. And for Inverness Caledonian Thistle, it's a chance to show what they can do against some of the country's best players. The Highland side, who play in the 3rd tier, will go up against top flight leaders Rangers on Sunday afternoon at the Caledonian Stadium.
I mean, it's going to be an experience that, will be good for the club. It'll be good for the girls to be able to experience playing in front of hopefully a good crowd, as well as playing against some of these top international players. So in that sense, yeah, we could say it as a win-win. As we know, football's a results business, but at the end of the day, we'll enjoy the day.
A bit nervous. I feel like it's going to be a big event. A lot of people are watching and stuff, but we've just got to take the experience. It's not every day you get to play alongside those sort of players, so just got to take it in our stride and do what we can.
Edinburgh and Glasgow Warriors women's teams are in action in the Celtic Challenge again this weekend. Edinburgh host Irish team Wolfhounds at Hive Stadium tomorrow, and on Sunday Glasgow play Gwalai Lightning at Cardiff Arms Park. Last weekend Edinburgh came out on top against Glasgow Warriors in the team's first ever meeting. And for Edinburgh forward Poppy Fletcher, the match represented a significant moment for women's rugby in Scotland.
That felt like the biggest game I've ever played, and I've been lucky enough to be in the Scotland setup, and I've been to Italy and all of this stuff. So yeah, for an Edinburgh versus Glasgow derby, that's something that a lot of us have watched for a while. I've been to 1872 Cup games for years and years and years. And to have the first women's team, to be playing in the first women's team, I don't know, just to have a crowd, and it was just class. It was like magic. It was way bigger than expected.
To basketball now, and Scotland's professional team, the Caledonia Gladiators, are about to begin the defence of the BBL trophy, which was their first piece of silverware in 20 years. They play Cheshire Phoenix this evening in front of a capacity crowd in East Kilbride. The Gladiators' owner has ambitious plans to make the team a force in UK and European competition and wants to instil a winning mentality in his players.
If you're going to build a team of champions, they've got to get used to winning, and they've got to believe they can win. And they've got to believe they could get into any competition with anyone and win. And that's what I hope. They'll come out tonight, they'll come out in every other game in this tournament. They'll believe they're going to defend their trophy. And what they have got is that gladiator spirit. They'll come out fighting, and they'll fight to the very last ball in the very last second. That's the characteristics of the team we've put together here.
That will be a brilliant game tonight, hopefully, Sally. And just some quick news for you, cricket. And Scotland's men will face defending champions England as well as Australia in this year's T20 World Cup. So, tough test.
That was a good mixed bag tonight.
Plenty tonight. Thanks, Sally.
Thanks a lot, Amy. Now it's over to Sarah to find out what's happening on BBC Scotland at 7 o'clock.
Tonight we'll have the latest from the Middle East, where Israel has proposed new arrangements for running Gaza after the war is over. From tomorrow, national insurance contributions are going down. We'll hear how much more workers might find in their pay packets. And we'll meet the musician who returned to his ancestral home on an island of seals off the north coast. See you at 7.
Here's Judith now to tell us what we can expect the weekend.
Well, our weather watcher here, Stu Lou, said it was very cold in the hills, and cold is going to be a theme coming our way next week. Sally, thank you very much. And a very good evening to you. Well, this has been the scene just off the East Lothian coast over the Bass Rock. A lot of cloud across parts of eastern Scotland, east coast, and showery rain. And it's all down to this area of low pressure to the north of us and this trailing front. It's been with us for a good few days. It is finally going to move away as we head through the weekend, allowing high pressure to build in, putting a protective arm around Scotland, protecting it from all the wet and windy weather that comes in from the Atlantic. But as you can tell from the blue colours, it's going to turn progressively colder as well. And it's a cold night in prospect too. For many of us, it's going to be dry. We'll still have that showery rain across the Northern Isles, some showers for the north and some for the west coast. That bits and pieces of rain for Aberdeenshire coast, but eventually pooling away. A risk of ice where temperatures fall to freezing, if not below, is particularly across the northeast. A widespread frost forming away from coastal areas, and some mist and fog patches forming as well. And they could be quite stubborn to shift tomorrow morning. A lot of dry weather initially. We'll see some mist and fog, but plenty of sunshine coming through as we head through the course of the day. However, that weather front still plaguing the Northern Isles, bringing outbreaks of showery rain, brisk winds as well. Maybe something brighter over Orkney at times. Caithness should see some sunshine. Easter Ross and look at eastern Scotland. At last, the sun is coming through for the east coast and across western Scotland too. A lovely day, plenty of sunshine. Some stubborn fog down towards the Solway area, but across the west coast, a scattering of light showers, but they'll be pushed in on occasionally fresh westerly winds. So a quick snapshot if you're heading to the hills tomorrow. Well, it will be mostly dry across all ranges right through the weekend. Very good visibility at the tops, bitterly cold thanks to fresh breezes, but the winds will be lighter on Sunday. Sunday looks good as well. The rest of Saturday's pretty much the same, dry with some sunshine, clear spells overnight. The showers easing over the Northern Isles along with the winds, so finally that low pressure losing its grip. So a cold start to Sunday, still some mist and fog patches around first thing as well, but lots of sunshine coming through. The showers easing over the Northern Isles along with the winds, and it will feel noticeably colder.
Great stuff. Thank you very much, Judith. Now, tonight's main news again. An American suspected of faking his own death and hiding out in Scotland has been extradited back to the US to face rape charges. Nicholas Rossi lost his final appeal against being returned to his homeland last month. And 2 people have been arrested in connection with the shooting of a man outside a pub in Edinburgh. Mark Webbley was killed just before midnight on Hogmanay. And McAlpine will be here with your late news at around 10:30 tonight. But from everyone on the team, enjoy your evening. Bye-bye.